Hey, welcome back. We're on the Marketer of the Day podcast with Mr. Benjamin Moróne from Zabota.io. That's Zabota.io. And we're going to be talking about something that is an essential but often overlooked element of a successful business, and that is to hire reliable, trustworthy, and skilled workers, because recruiting the right employee is a difficult struggle for many companies. But luckily, we have the man, the myth, the legend, the expert, the problem solver, Mr. Benjamin Moróne here to talk to us about these kind of scary things like someone who can run your day-to-day operations, figuring out the hiring process, global recruitment, so much more. So Benjamin will solve some problems for us, get us on the right track. So Ben, glad to be speaking with you.
Hey, thank you so much, Robert. Thanks for the opportunity. It's quite the intro. Glad to be speaking with you.
Yeah, we need to start with a bang, right? We need to get people excited. And we're a couple of black t-shirt guys who are going to talk about remote talent and especially hiring pre-vetted executive assistants and Zabota.io. So we hyped up the audience a little bit, introduced you, but in your own words, what really gets you excited? What's your current focus and passion?
My current focus and passion is connecting the great people of Central and Eastern Europe and then also Latin America to online businesses and small businesses in the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada. I've been running this company for the last several years now, and so I've really had the opportunity to see our first couple placements, those people stay at those companies and see their professional growth. And I think that's kind of like the fun part of this business is all those relationships. And as you run this business, it's like the first person you put in, they're still there if you do it correctly 2 years later, right? And so that's kind of my main focus is just repeating that cycle of growth and opportunity for these people here in these locales where we're hiring from, and then also helping the small business owners with hiring.
I love it. You're changing lives all around the world. And, you mentioned something that it took me way too many years to wrap my head around, because there was probably a good 10, 15 years when I said, hey, I know I need to outsource and hire, but I had this limiting belief that when you hired someone, they last for a few months and then they go away and you find someone else. And maybe you go to these freelance sites. And it was a few years ago when a guy told me finally, hey, I've had this VA for 14 years, 18 years. And that's when it finally clicked. Hey, you hire people for the long haul to run your business, to be there kind of permanently, which is a little scary place to be, but it prevents you from having this house built on sand, right? It prevents you from scrambling. And so I currently have a team of 9 people, and they've all been around for 3 or 4 years. So it finally clicked with me that you hire people, put them in, and they're in there for kind of a good chunk of their career. And so I love this idea. And so why Latin America and Central Europe when you can, nowadays things are done globally and worldwide? Why not from locally, in your own country, or why not from a third world country? Why these areas specifically?
Yeah, so why not for local is some of the cost side of it. So for small businesses, growing businesses, especially someone who would need part-time help, maybe they're working just too much and they just need to bring in someone for 3-4 hours a day. It's really hard to justify paying, Western rates, especially if you're just a small business and you're kind of pre-product market fit, you're just kind of figuring it out. So that's why you wouldn't go that local route. For the kind of third world or many time zones ahead, it really comes down to a couple key things. So time zones, if you're hiring and you're on the East Coast, your business is based in the East Coast, most of your clientele is East Coast based, you can hire from Europe. I'm in Warsaw right now in Poland, 6 hours ahead. It's not that difficult. And especially if you're running development teams, you need work that's done kind of asynchronously. You can have these people working ahead in the day. You wake up, you kind of pass each other, kind of like 2 ships in the night. Now you're getting on shift and starting the work. So that's why we like to hire from Central and Eastern Europe. And then Latin America is more for some of the nearshore stuff, a lot of client-facing sales, those types of roles. Because people in California, it's a little bit harder for them to justify a hire that's 9 hours ahead. That difference gets a little bit large. So I see when you go over 6-7 hours, it can kind of affect the team dynamics. With Latin America, it's much closer. And also with the cold calling and sales stuff, they can kind of lose their accents, and it's very easy to understand them.
Wonderful. So there's a specific fit for some of these time zones and some of these jobs.
Mhm.
And so we mentioned when we introduced you that you are big on hiring people for operations or for
Mhm.
executive assistants. And so what are the possibilities? Like when people talk about hiring a team and having them take things off your plate, take over tasks for
Mhm.
you, what gets you excited about the possibilities?
So it's really the transformation. One of my first ever clients, I think it was like my third or fourth client. Her name's Amanda. She runs a grant writing company. And so she was basically managing like 65 different projects in like an Excel spreadsheet. She was just doing that. And then these were all different like clients she was working on different projects. And so I noticed how she's running around doing all these projects. I was working in a co-working space very close to her. And I thought, how do you do all this? And you're also a mom of four. Like, how are you running 65 projects at one time by yourself? And you also have a family and all these other, dance recitals and soccer practice and all these other things that you're running, right? And so we put in a project manager there, and that project manager was basically able to handle a lot of the client communication, a lot of the organization. Usually when people have been working in a certain way and they get kind of overwhelmed, all of their systems or lack of systems start to come out or they start to break. So by putting in someone to kind of clean up and get them reoriented, it can really help their business. So we saw a massive growth with her. Like her business just went up like a rocket after we had put that project manager in. It was mainly because they were just organizing everything and just kind of acting as her right hand man, right hand person for her to be able to just focus on actually growing the business. So those little like stories are the exciting part of it, because the person goes from this state of just being constantly kind of just reactive and they just feel like they're working 24/7 to actually feeling like they're running and growing a business strategically.
I love that. And you're so right that it's easy to build yourself another job, right? You think that
Yeah.
being an entrepreneur, building a business is freedom, but then you end up building all these things where only you understand how it works and it works just enough. And then if you were to take a vacation or take a break, then everything would just go on pause. And it's a way better mental state to be in where you have
Mhm.
someone who runs a lot and then you are more of the visionary, right? You're more of the person that says, well, hey, let me work on the sales or getting clients or the big picture or the next steps and not just putting out the various day-to-day fires. And so you mentioned there about how sometimes when people are just like running things themselves, when it's a one man show, one woman show, they end up getting stuck in spreadsheet land, right?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of better ways to go about it. Like there's all these, like project management things and Asana and like
Mhm.
automation workflow. And so what sort of like horror stories or before and afters do you see as far as like when one of these project managers jumps in, gets things organized, like what's possible as far as rising out of the one personness?
Yeah, so that Amanda story, basically that project manager came in and then built out a Monday.com or like an Asana, basically project management tool for her to have a visualization of like where are all these projects going, what's happening, what are the stages, and that was enabling her to be able to hire more fulfillment team. So grant writers, people who can do consulting. Like she built out her team to about 5, 6 people, and it all started with that second hire who was doing that project management stuff. Other clients, we've had them just come in, they're a little just bit overwhelmed with if they have Dropbox, if they have Google Drive, if they have Microsoft SharePoint, it's kind of all over the place. Someone can come in and really organize it and really take the time to systematize before they actually scale. Because I have things, I look at my to-do list and I'm like, I need to do this. It takes 4 or 5 hours. I'll do that on the weekend. Then the weekend comes and some other priority jumps in front of it. By just having someone at least part time, they can really kind of run defense and get some of these stuff or get some of the stuff out of the way for you.
I like that a lot. And especially where you said there about how you systematize and then you scale because a lot of
Mhm.
these businesses, I imagine, are kind of they're doing just good enough, right? They're struggling. And if they had that big client, that big sale that they've always wanted, then it would put them out of business, right? They'd be even more
Mhm.
overwhelmed. So they're stuck in this kind of middle ground land. And I imagine that it really pays to have someone who has like a brain for project management and who knows
Mhm.
these tools inside and out versus some business owner who's kind of making it up as they go along.
That's correct. I recently did a hire with an executive business coach. He's like a speaker. He speaks on stages all across the country and advises some Fortune 500 companies. He's like, look, I'm not that operations guy. I'm not that systems guy, but I'm a really good people person. I love speaking on stage. I love doing the coaching. I love hopping on the Zooms, getting the best out of people. But the whole back end, the system stuff is just something that I'm just not that guy. I'm that people person. And so by putting someone in who can kind of help them and assist them and maybe build upon their weaknesses and make them strengths and make it for the business owner not to have to think about some things that they don't want to do, or they just don't want to try to figure out how to do, that can really give a lot of peace of mind. So the business owner can just kind of stay in their swim lane and focus on what they do best.
I love that. And that's like one of those like painful lessons of entrepreneurship, right? Like when you're
Mm-hmm.
young and you go to school, they make you take all these elective classes and maybe your parents throw you into all these sports. You're kind of trained to do all
Mm-hmm.
these things that you don't want to do, which is fine when you're young because you're kind of taking that inventory. But then once you get to middle age, older age, you're like, I'm too old for this stuff, right? And it definitely pays to look at that inventory again and be like, well, hey, what excites me? What am I good at? And what's really a drag? Am I the people person, but not really the operations person? And luckily, especially now in this day and age of the cloud and remote hiring, we don't have to turn our weaknesses into strengths. We can turn our strengths into better strengths and just leave
Mm-hmm.
the weaknesses to someone else. And even what I love about some of these stories that you mentioned, especially like a couple stories ago, was you mentioned this whole idea of it's not just hiring one person, right? You free up
Mm-hmm.
this and then you can build a team and then and it kind of like grows and becomes a beast on its own. But I imagine that some people are still, there's always some excuse to make up for not doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and especially I think maybe people are maybe worried about the irreversibility of it, right? Of saying, well, if I hire someone and they install all this stuff, it'll be hard for me to unwind that. And we don't want them to unwind that. So how do we remove some of the hesitation? Like what objections do people have or like
Mm-hmm.
what could go wrong? And how do we just blow past that? That way people hire a project manager, build a team, never look back.
Yeah, so with the kind of unwind objection, with that I look at it as your current systems like aren't working. You may not have a system that's enabling you to grow. So bringing in at least a little bit of structure is going to be miles ahead of where you are now, even if it's not that perfect project management system. I look at my business that I've been running for 2.5 years now, and it's like I've been on Monday, I've been on Asana, and now I'm in Airtable and I stay in Airtable and it's perfectly built out and we build things on it, we build automations. It's going to keep growing and breathing the project management. It's never a static thing. Your business is constantly moving forward. And so you have to have some sort of system that grows with it. It's like you're constantly like building like a little building. That's basically how it looks with the project managed operation side of things. With some of the hesitancies and objections, people are concerned about maybe English level or training. We're always looking for people with very, very high English level. We're hiring from countries that I consider strategic locations where their English level, their education system is better than surrounding countries or very, very top tier. And so that's kind of the way we don't have to deal with people who just don't speak English, because there's wonderful people who don't speak English, but if they don't speak our language, we're just not going to be able to work with them. It's not going to be a good fit, right? And so the English level thing is something that we really, really vet for. And then also looking for people who are growth mindset, where they're taking external courses. I mean, HubSpot, some of these other project management, these different CRMs, those types of tools have a lot of certifications. And a lot of people do those in foreign countries because like, I want to learn more about this tool. I want to get really good with it because it's going to open me up to this remote online world. So really looking for people who've already worked with the tools that you're trying to install or tools that you'd like to install will really, really help you in that long run, instead of getting someone, hiring them and just saying, can you just go figure out that tool I heard about online and then like build it into my business? You're kind of asking them to do almost like a co-founder type role when they've been hired to do a certain type of role. Maybe they're not a builder, but you've hired them for a completely different role. And so if we can find someone who already has the skills that you want, instead of thinking, okay, I need to build this person's skills, you're going to be more successful with that hire because you're hiring them for the skills that you want inside of your business.
Well, these are some really great insights, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that there are some of these countries that they might even speak as good as English or even better English than the rest of
Mhm.
us Americans. And so there's that part of it. But then there's also, well, if you want to perform this task and you want them to use this tool, then you don't have to leave it up to guesswork. There's these certifications that exist, and if they pass the certification, then
Mhm.
they already know it. They've already figured it out, and that takes a lot of the scariness out of it. And so, as far as the hiring or the onboarding or the running a team, like what should people know? What's maybe not spoken about enough as far as just the people skills?
So that's a couple of different things, but the onboarding side of it is probably the number one piece that will cause people to derail or not be successful with the hire. And so the hire could be, let's say, an 85%, maybe they're like a B player. If your onboarding experience, your onboarding process is very, very dialed in, that person could become an A player. But if they're an A player and you bring them to an onboarding process that's like, hey, welcome to the company. I'm available in Slack if you need me, or I'm available in Microsoft Teams. They're not going to be successful. They're going to churn in 30, 45 days, and 90 days, they'll be looking for another job. And so that's something where the onboarding needs to be very, very dialed. And I like to kind of do this like 2-part onboarding. This is what I suggest all the clients do. And I got this from Layla Hormozy. This isn't my own own creation, but there's a company context onboarding, and then there's a role context or role specific onboarding. The company context can be a bunch of stuff that's basically able to be put into like a PowerPoint or a Gamma doc where you can say, hey, this is our mission. These are our values. This is how we run things around here. These are the growth. This is the story. All the different types of things that makes the person understand, okay, I'm part of this team. This is what this team believes. And then you can have a role specific onboarding that goes over what are the KPIs? Who's reporting to who? How do we do things to make sure that we hit the goals within this department? So that's how you can kind of split it up. So it's not like a 45-minute Zoom call where you're like, I have to get through all these different check mark boxes. And then it becomes something where the person's just sitting, listening to you talk for 45 minutes. You want to break it up, but you don't want to have it just be information overload. Because as the business owner, you know everything about the business, especially if you're a solo founder, you're a small team, you know everything. You can see kind of all of the map versus that person coming in, they can only see a very, very small part of a map. It's almost like if you ever played any like strategy games where you like discover different sections of the map. That person, you need to help them see more of your company and see enough of your company to be able to do the role successfully.
I like that a lot. And I have to admit, up until maybe even like 5, 6 years ago, I hadn't even heard this term onboarding, and like what a concept, right? Of just like not
Yeah.
letting your new hire fall off as soon as you hire them, and then you have the churn, wonder what happened. And so that's very helpful that there's the kind of the company orientation and then also the role orientation. And I imagine that helps there's everyone involved, right? It helps you
Mhm.
not having to overthink the delivering the information, and it helps them if there's as two separate pieces to easier understand it. And so there's some exciting possibilities here, but what am I not asking you? What do you wish that I would ask you about Zabota or about hiring from Central Europe, Latin America? Like, what's the missing question in our conversation here?
Well, the onboarding one was if you can nail that, you can get 90% of the recruitment process correct. I would say also move with the same intensity in the recruitment process as you would a sales process. And so what causes people to lose trust in their future employer or employers in general? Slow communication during the recruitment process. And so at every stage before you start your recruitment process, before you throw up a job description on LinkedIn or Indeed or wherever you're looking for talent, you want to have a very clear recruitment process laid out. So, okay, we're going to have a screening interview. After that, within 2 days, I will let the person know that we're going to have a final or we're going to have a technical test. Then they complete the technical test. 2 days later, I'll bring them to a second round interview or a more in-depth interview with decision makers. 3 days after that, then we'll have some sort of decision. And if you can keep it in these brackets, so like a 10-day bracket, 12-day bracket, you're going to be able to just make it like a pipeline, just almost like an inverse of your sales pipeline, and be able to look, okay, these applicants are here. Nobody made it past, or very few people made it past the screening interview. Maybe the English wasn't right. Now we have some people doing a technical test. And now we have 3 final candidates and we can make a decision. And if you give the 2-day time frames on communication, candidates respect it. It moves everything very, very efficiently through, but it also gives you time to think about it. I'm not asking for people to make decisions right there on the spot. They don't need to do that, right? I think they should sleep on their decisions, especially when they're bringing someone into their company. But if you have a really solid recruitment process, you just put a little bit of preparation into it. That's going to pay dividends in the long run when you go through with this recruitment process and then the onboarding. And that's really how you set up a really, really solid recruitment process.
That is a very cool idea of knowing ahead of time what your timeline is and what the pace should be, because you're so right that you need a little bit of time to think, but there's also the other problem of if you give yourself too many weeks or months to hire someone, then there'll be some other crisis and things will fall off. And next thing you know, now you've developed this bad habit of incompletion. And so it really helps to have the urgency and the follow up and just knowing ahead of time, like, okay, after 2 days, I'll do this and 3 days, I'll do that. It's good to be organized and have a plan in that way. And so this is all very amazing to think about. And we definitely want to send people to Zabota.io, which is Zabota.io. And what's the next step here? Is that the logical place to go to investigate this Eastern Europe, Latin America project manager type of hiring?
Yeah, so there, and then also our YouTube. You can just search Zabota Staffing on YouTube, or my name, Benjamin Moróne, last name Morone. We also have a newsletter. The newsletter is hosted at hirefromeuropeandlatam.com, so LATAM for LATAM. That's something that's been launched pretty recently, and we're always sharing guides and just free resources, no opt-in type of things on that newsletter.
Very nice. And, I can't get enough of of like the sort of this kind of training, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going right now, before I even forget, I'm going to youtube.com/Zabota staffing, and I'm clicking the
Mm-hmm.
subscribe button right this instant right now, because it helps to be immersed in this sort of thing, right? It helps
Mm-hmm.
to know about like how things are changing, or there's always what you don't know, you don't know. And if you say, oh my gosh, I need to suddenly figure out hiring, like it takes a while to get some of these ideas to soak into your head. And
Mm-hmm.
so youtube.com/Zabota staffing. That way we can kind of get immersed in what we want to know about how to know where to hire from and the recruitment process, finding an executive assistant, and all those other things that go along with it. And so as we go and subscribe to Zabota staffing on YouTube, and we go to Zabota.io, do you have any kind of last minute soundbite sort of advice for us? Do you have a fun quote or lesson that can really help these ideas from today stick?
So I'm not sure if it's a fun quote, but the quote is just know your inputs. And so too many times people get focused on what is the output? What is the revenue we're making from this? How many applicants are we getting? Like all these different types of things. You need to focus on that daily input. So if it's the time tracked, if it is the projects completed, if it's the leads reached out to, the revenue that's come in the door, those types of things you really, really need to focus on to be able to scale. And it took me way too long in my business to really just methodically go through every single thing and have it on spreadsheets and have it tracked very, very well with automations. And now that I have that visibility, it's made it a lot easier to scale, because I feel like business owners and in general, they're like, okay, I'll figure that out a little bit later. But if you don't have complete vision and complete control of everything in the company when you're first starting, you're just not going to be able to scale it to that next level, because you need to have that visibility. It's so vital. And so I think I would have saved myself a lot of time if I, from day one, tracked things better. And that's coming from the person who installs project managers and creates project management systems. And now I have that stuff all down. But when I very, very first started, it's quite the beast.
I agree completely. Like what you focus on grows, and I can definitely see your sales background from this, because like people
Mm-hmm.
are always like wanting to have the windfall, right? Let me get
Mm-hmm.
a huge client. Let me get all this traffic. Let me get all these clicks. And it's like, but what can you control, and what are your inputs in making all that happen? And so you're so right to have that kind of complete picture to know the whole flow chart. That way, if something's falling short, if you're not getting those the success with the hires you want, or you're not getting the amount of leads in the pipeline, whatever that goal is. If you're not getting it, well, what's the math problem? Are you doing enough of the input to get the output you want, or are the bottlenecks somewhere? It's very interesting and fascinating to think about, especially as we go to Zabota.io, Zabota.io. And once someone goes to that webpage, what would you like someone to do? Would you like them to watch the video or click on work with us? Or like, what's the logical next step once they go to that webpage?
Yeah, so look through a couple of the case studies, see if any of them resonate with you, if they're similar industries, similar niches. If you want to book a call, you can click the link at the top of the page or at the bottom of the page, and then we can speak with you. That's really the best way for us to connect. If you have any questions about the recruitment process, anything like that, we can just address it on the call. If we can't work together, that's totally fine. But at least you're going to walk away with some feedback on your recruitment process and if what you're looking for is feasible.
Very nice and very cool. And so if this sounds like you, if you have this problem, if you know that you need to systematize and scale, things need to be better organized, you need a better support team to run things for you, go to Zabota.io and check out those case studies. If that makes sense, then click the button to book the call and take the next step. You'll be glad you did. And we've been speaking with Benjamin Moróne from Zabota.io. Wonderful having this fun conversation with you.
Hey, thank you so much, Robert. Thank you.
All right, very excellent. And so
Cool.
this is coming out, I believe, around July 8th or so, but don't quote me on that. But I added.
Perfect. Thank you. Could you tell me a little bit more about your podcast offer? The VA had just said, no, I'm not interested in the podcast offer, like at all. She kind of used strange English on there. It sounded a little bit strict, but no, I want to learn a little bit more about your podcast offer because it's something that's crossed my mind starting a podcast. I don't know if it's something that I do in the next 2-3 months, but I want to learn a little bit more about your business with it.